As certified life coaches with 45 years combined experience in human resources, Jen Trumm and Katherine Fry have both experienced the highest of highs and the lowest of lows, both personally and professionally. And what they each know to be true is this: our mental, physical, and emotional health are the essential building blocks in order to thrive and shine in the field of HR. So in a first of its kind podcast, we'll be getting real and to discuss and share what has contributed to both our struggles and successes, with the goal of inspiring women around the globe to stand tall and take the necessary action to both thrive and shine in HR. Here are your hosts, Jen and Katherine. Hello. Hey, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yes. Good morning.
Good morning. Welcome to Thrive and Shine, everybody.
Good morning. Yes. Welcome, everyone. We're so glad you're here. Jen, how was your weekend? Dying to know.
Oh my gosh, it was a bit challenging this weekend. I as a budding entrepreneur with this podcast and coaching and everything else, I really rely on the social medias and the everything that we have to
Yes.
make everything happen, because I have a full-time job. I have a
Yes,
life
you do,
that
girl.
I'm trying to also live. And so, yeah, there have been a few changes recently in Facebook, most specifically, but LinkedIn keeps changing things. So every time they change things, I feel like I'm like this baby all over again. And I have to learn, these changes. So Meta, Facebook made some changes recently. And yeah, I was spinning over the weekend trying to kind of figure out, okay, now what, especially with this Facebook group. So I love the Facebook group so much. We have over 16,500 people in the Facebook group. So that one in particular got hit hard with these changes. So I am really spinning a little bit this morning, but that's okay. I think, me being me, it's about being resourceful and kind of just picking up and saying, okay, now what? So here I am.
Yeah.
Brushing off, like I said before we were about to go live, I'm going to wipe the tears. I'm okay.
Wipe the tears. Yes. But I love that you're being so honest, because I guarantee you so many of our listeners, whether they're listening live, as we're ironically streaming this, right? I mean, there are so many beautiful technological advances that allow us to stream this podcast live, across LinkedIn, Facebook, all the platforms, YouTube. And you're right. I mean, those things are constantly changing. And I, as somebody who was in HR for 25 years, I still am. I'm a consultant, but I'm not in it 9 to 5. And learning about these platforms and learning the nuances and the differences between LinkedIn, between Facebook, how things interface. I mean, no wonder I've been advised to stick to one platform because of what we're talking about today. What has been happening in the ether and with Meta and just all the things. I think if you're not a budding entrepreneur or starting an HR consulting business or starting an HR coaching business or something like that, you're probably not aware of all the things that go on behind the scenes when it comes to entrepreneurship in this day and age. It's crazy. It's crazy. So Jen, my hat is off to you for beautifully walking the line and maintaining that commitment to our profession and caring so much about the 16,000 women in your Facebook group. I see it. I mean, I see it in your posts, and I know it takes a lot of work. So my hat is just off to you. It's really, really remarkable what you're doing. And if I need to call the folks at Meta, I'll be happy to do that. Because I have so many contacts at Meta, guys. That was a joke. Little joke.
Well, how about you, Katherine? How was your weekend?
Well, I as we were leading up to getting this started today, I never in a million years thought I was a classic people pleaser. I thought that I had like a tidbit of it. But as I started diving into research this weekend, boy, was my mind blown. So I did just so much thinking and reflecting on my career, and of course looking forward to where I'm going. And where does people pleasing play into that? How does people pleasing play into it? That both in my reflection of my past, what am I learning from my past, but also how do I want to show up moving forward? So it was really, really fascinating. I struggled and had to do a lot of journaling. I met with my coach yesterday. I had a lot of tears this weekend. So it's really interesting that you kind of felt that way today on a Monday. And I woke up feeling better because I think I just flushed out a lot of that cortisol through all the crying I did this weekend. So there you go. That's God's honest truth on this end.
Well, I'm thankful. I was telling you a little bit ago that I went to that rage retreat last weekend, which was really about like that release that so many of us don't do, right? We
Right.
hold on to it, we hold on to it, we hold on to it. That's a whole nother episode. But basically, having that happen just a week ago, I
Yeah.
do feel like I'm kind of able to re-regulate
Yeah.
pretty quickly, but still like it's like these things, they're gonna just come, they're gonna come at us and just
Yeah.
it's life, right? So
It is life. It is life.
yeah.
Well, I'm curious how you define people pleasing. Like, let's just dive in. How do you define it? What are some common misconceptions about it? And yeah, let's just start with the definition so that we're all on the same page about what we believe people pleasing to be. Let's just start there.
Okay. So I'm gonna go right in. I like thought about this a lot over the weekend too. I looked at definitions out there and I really then kind of gut checked myself and I
Oh, I
said,
love that.
okay, what is it really to me? And I think, you know, when we make a choice about how we choose to show up in the world, right? It is about pleasing someone, right? So I think the idea is at the end of the day, we want to be able to find the greatest common denominator, but many times that choice is not the one we make, but it is a choice. And so people pleasing is really about like becoming authentically aligned so we feel good about the choices we make, that we are pleasing those we most love, including ourselves. That's people pleasing. And again, and for me, like it doesn't always need to feel good, right? So sometimes we feel like we're people pleasing and it like we always say, it doesn't always have to feel good, but it does need to feel right. Right? Like it needs to feel
Mm.
right. And so if the pleasing we're doing for others doesn't feel right, even if it doesn't feel good, that's where it's misaligned.
Oh,
And
that's so interesting.
yeah, and
Okay.
I mean, I just went deep into it and I'm like, okay, I'm
You
gonna come out.
did.
I'm coming out the gates with this one because I'm like, it's all about authenticity and it's about the fact that many of us are just not aligned. And when we're not aligned and we really check in with ourselves around people pleasing, that's the disconnect, right? That's what then
Mhm.
causes the bitterness and the resentment. We'll go into that later, I'm sure, but all these emotions that come up for us, that's why, because we're misaligned. So, yeah, so people pleasing, I think everything that we do, every choice we make, every action we take is about pleasing, right? There is some like pleasing others or pleasing ourselves. And ultimately, it's about like whether or not it's aligned with our authentic selves. Period. Full stop.
I'm
Any
I mean, I got so sucked in from the very first thing that you said about we're always pleasing someone.
yes.
So, just so I understand, do you think when we are people pleasing, are we trying to please ourselves? Or is that what you're talking about with the misalignment? That we're
I
forgetting about ourselves? Because I want to make sure I understand your definition, because what you just shared was not you were. Oh, and this is what I love about this podcast. So I want to make sure I'm clear.
Okay, and the sound cut out a second. So what I just shared was what? Say that again.
So do you believe, like, when you looked up people pleasing and when you looked
Yes.
internally, do you believe
Yes.
people pleasing is about, like, a definition, an operable definition? Is it about striving to please others, or is it about pleasing ourselves?
This is where I go off the rails a little bit, and this is where I go rogue. And so I do believe people pleasing should be about an alignment of the pleasing of ourselves with the pleasing
Yes.
of
Okay.
others.
Okay.
Yeah, that's my definition. So, and that's not a
Okay.
definition you're going to find in the Webster's and so
Correct.
yes.
Correct. Okay.
Yeah, so no,
That's
you
what
got it.
that's
You totally got it.
okay. So you sort of answered it was a two-part question about people pleasing. How do you define it? So you didn't, like, how Jen Trumm defines people pleasing. And you also hit on the misconception about it, because the classic definitions that I was finding in the
Yeah.
Webster's, so to speak, are about striving to please others while sacrificing your own wants and needs.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
you're saying that, I think what I'm hearing you say is, yes, I understand that that's the definition that is commonly used, but my personal definition of people pleasing, there's an and. There's
Yes.
there's pleasing others and pleasing myself. Yeah, I love
Yes.
that. I love it.
Yes. Yes,
Yeah.
yes, yes. Because I think if we're really truly honest with ourselves, right? When we take actions and when we engage in behavior, there is a why behind it, right? And through mindfulness, through more attention and that sort of thing, we can kind of then figure that out. And so it's really just about that investigative process to understand why we do the things we do. Why are we making the choices we're making? And if it is because we're people pleasing, that's causing bitterness and resentment and everything else, then maybe there is an opportunity to find that alignment, because I think that's where the gap is. That's where the miss is. So yeah, I think with people pleasing, it's just for me the shifting of the definition itself, which we will get into more.
I love that. I love
So
that so much, because I'm thinking about the posts in the Women of HR support group. I did a post, I think it was Saturday morning, maybe it was Friday night, but it was just something, I'm not going to get the right words, but are you a people pleaser and do you actually want to do something about it? And in the thread, there were so many comments from women saying, something along the lines of, if you can tell me how to stop people pleasing, I want to know. Because I think it is just a part of my being. It's a part of our profession. So once again, I was just blown away, like, oh yeah, we've got to talk about it. And Jen, you just offered up a definition that no one's heard of, and I could not agree more. Because I truly believe that if we are people pleasers, especially in HR, it is just because of how we've been showing up. It's because of the narrative we've been telling ourselves in our own brain. And we'll get into this, absolutely. For me, I was really surprised. Like, it made me realize how much I've been disrespecting myself.
oh yeah.
Yeah, truly. And
Mhm.
here's something that I heard that I didn't understand about people pleasing, is that people pleasers have a tendency to show up in a certain way to almost put on that proverbial HR mask we always talk about. But people
Mhm.
pleasers actually are grumbling underneath it. They're
Oh,
grumbling behind the scenes. They're getting fired up. And that was the part of people pleasing I had never heard before, which is why I disassociate them. I'm like, I'm not a people pleaser, because I get pissed. I get fired up. And it starts really quietly. Oh, you're leaving at 5? Okay, have a good day. Have a good day. And meanwhile, I am seething underneath. Why am I always staying late? I had no idea that what I was doing was actually very normal under the classic definition of people pleasing. Did you hear about that in your research too?
that
Or does that
The
resonate with you personally?
Yeah, and I think it has been something that I've learned over time is part of people pleasing sometimes is when we're not saying a word, right? And
Oh,
it's just
dang.
yes. And
Yes.
it's through just the fact that, we're internalizing, these different things we're perceiving outside of ourselves and then thinking that we're, making a sacrifice, we're martyr, like whatever it is, right? But we now kind of are project, yeah, the whole thing is like, it's fascinating because
It's
really,
fascinating.
yeah. So I love that. I totally, totally love that. So
Yeah.
in terms of like the misconception for you, you would say it was similar then?
I mean, I I was like, certainly people, we have to get a clear definition. So we need to talk about the misconceptions. I was blown away.
Yeah.
So I don't know what anybody else thinks. All I can share is that my classic definition of people pleasing, like that person who's always pleasing others, but they're actually calm and happy about it. I didn't realize that it is known that people pleasers have this like resistance on the back end, so to speak. That there's a little bit of, I don't know if it's anger or whatever it is, but I just found that to be really interesting.
Yeah.
Um, I did the signs that you're a people pleaser that I was gathering from various research articles. You can't delegate, you can't say no, you procrastinate, you act overwhelmed. That blew my mind. So I'll get into that. Saying yes, but meaning no, and then forgetting you said yes. Oh my God, that is me. I'll be like, yes, 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 I want to come to that dinner party. There is actually an element of me wanting to do that, but then the introvert of me is like, no, I don't. And then I just forget, I don't know. So that really resonated with me. Working on pet projects instead of priorities, that was really interesting. Working through lunch. So yeah, I just all of a sudden I was like, okay, I'm all of these things. I am classic
Yeah.
people pleaser. It was just really interesting.
Well, I think that's great, actually, right? Like you and I know that. We know that awareness is key. And I think sometimes those sneakers that like perhaps it doesn't come in for you in the standard understanding that you've had up until now. But
Yeah.
here it is, like it's snuck in. And now you can see where it's been showing up for you in some of these areas that then have caused you to maybe then ha- have the resentments or have the anger. And yeah, I think all of that sometimes we get really like caught up in that's a problem, and that I kind of having this awareness, but that's just the beginning. That's just the beginning. And I
Yes.
think for me, that's totally what it's been in terms of people pleasing. Because I'm a pretty confident and a pretty assertive person. I think like I've kind of put that out there in the podcast and just in life. And so when it comes to people pleasing, it does definitely has shown up for me very differently in my early career. And we'll get into that because
Oh
we'll
my
be
God, I
talking
love it.
about
I
the
love it.
stories. But yeah, like people pleasing in terms of how you see most people talk about, especially okay, I will say this
Oh, I can't
people who
wait.
tend to be the squeaky wheel about things, right? I think we all people please in our own different ways. And those of us who are introverts, those of us, whoever like is out there who may not like be as vocal about things, it just shows up differently. It just shows up differently. And now I think we're going to talk about that a little bit
Yeah.
more. And I think that'll be really exciting, I think, for our listeners and viewers.
Well, what do you think is, can you kind of articulate the difference between like HR, we're supposed to be very accommodating. We're supposed to be approachable. I hear that from every boss I've ever had. HR is approachable. It's almost like your door has to be open all the time. You have to drop everything for anyone at any time. And for me, I think that feeds into the people pleasing, and we'll get into that. But I'm just curious for you. Do you think that, what is the difference between healthy approachability in HR or healthy accommodation in HR versus unhealthy people pleasing? Or is there even a third that I'm not even thinking about? Like, what's unhealthy versus healthy?
I think it's the authentic gut check,
Mm.
like I really do. And that's where I think as you say that around like what is and isn't unhealthy is really about like what feels right within you, because that's where it falls. And so there's a spectrum of that, right? If you are kind of thinking about your why for doing something, for acting in a certain way or saying a certain thing, and that why doesn't feel kind of aligned with you, and now you're doing it because of your boss or your spouse or your partner or your kid, because that's what they're asking you to do or telling you what to do, but deep down you're like, I really don't want to do this. I don't,
Yes,
like that's where I think then we make these sacrifices, and then again and again and again, and that's where bitterness rises. And that's so it's like it has to start with us. And if it's not aligned and we are making that sacrifice and we're doing it for a particular reason with a good solid why that we can feel grounded in, then cool. Right? Because for me, the more aware I've become, the more I can then just make that choice and move on. But if
yep,
you're noticing that it is simmering and you're holding on to it and it kind of comes up again, and then when they ask again, it all of a sudden is like, right? Like all of this comes up for you. That's something to do some gut checking, some thought work on. And
fire.
I think, what's that?
Yes. I said
Yeah.
fire. I used that word
Yeah.
inappropriately.
But
You're on fire. That's what I'm saying, Jen. Yes.
yeah, it
All day
just
long.
it really like it's that evolution of being able to recognize that misalignment. And that misalignment is everything. We think making these sacrifices, it's part of society, it's what they're telling, what we've been told for so long. But if we can't kind of bring that alignment in, and that's where kind of that daily, whether it's meditation or mindful or whatever it is, but that alignment check is, for me, one of the most important things I do every single day. So I
Yeah.
think kind of putting that out there, often within our conversations means so much to me, because it really is like, it is so much when it comes to this stuff. So
I
I'm
totally
pausing.
agree. No, I totally agree. And when I'm working with my clients, most of my clients are women, and we talk about overworking, overeating, over drinking, overthinking, just all of the overing that we do in our life. Maybe over people pleasing. I've never used that as a technical term. Maybe I'm going to start using it. I don't know. But I made this major connection when I was on a run yesterday morning. And I oftentimes, my clients will ask, how do I know if it's self care versus self sabotage, right? I think about that glass of wine after work, right? When
Yeah.
is it self sabotage versus self care? And the very clear cut short answer I can give that I think is just so beautiful and succinct is if there is a negative consequence on the back end. So if you
Mhm.
have a hangover, or if you have a tendency to emotionally eat or overeat, if you are gaining weight, if you are obese, if you are experiencing blood sugar highs, like that is a sign that you sort of transitioned into self sabotage.
Mhm.
And the same thing goes with people pleasing. I think you articulated it so beautifully. You have to pause to sort of reflect, use that skill of reflection and say, is there a negative consequence on the back end of this? Did I once again just bust through lunch, shovel my food down because my boss just said, hey, could you get this to me by the end of the day?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
there's a different way. And Jen, I love that you're confident and you're assertive. I think those are two really, really useful skills that have probably helped you. Maybe not. I mean, I'm just guessing here, like sort of balance out those people pleasing tendencies. If you just have this amazing ability and this awareness that you've developed. And I have it too. I'm just not sure because of the skills we've developed. right? So I think it's just a matter of the very first thing for people who are saying, I don't know what to do. I am a pleaser, because that's what I saw on Facebook was, tell me, like, I have no idea how to curb this. I want to echo what you said. The very first thing is to just have an awareness. If there is just this, if there is this misalignment, your body's going to tell you, your brain's going to tell you, just pay attention to it. I love what you said. I think that's really cool.
I love what you said too. Well,
Okay.
let's get into some stories.
I love that. I love that. So I'm curious, do you have an example of how people pleasing has really negatively impacted you?
Oh my gosh.
Oh,
Yeah,
that was a deep
I
breath.
was going all over the place. What's that?
That was a deep breath. I feel
I know.
something
I feel
good's
like I
gonna
do
come
it
out.
every time.
I love it.
I was trying to figure out, am I going, in the past or, way in the past, or how far in the
Yeah.
past. But I think one of the things you brought up a little bit ago that helped solidify the deal for me was talking about me being a confident, and with
Ooh.
having like assertiveness or confidence. When I was first early in my career, I had like this. The thing about me too is for all my life, I've had such a fuse, right? Like there is such a fuse in me that I have to figure out how to regulate. And I've had to regulate so much of my life. So early in my career, I was a pistol. I was as so full of energy. And I also like was completely like introverted and shy, but also had like assertive confidence. It's a very interesting, combination. And so when I would get fired up, I mean, like really upset about something. So I had a boss, and actually it was my boss's boss. So I had the gall to actually like confront my boss's boss one time, who was just kind of just a bitch. She just like had this air about her that was just really like, above everybody. And she would come into our office, and, she would kind of put, people down in different ways. And so this one day I stood up, and she was standing in the office, and she like was this blonde and pretty and like all of this, but she, just had kind of this snotty thing. And so I stood up and I said, ma'am, you were being disrespectful to every single person in this room. So I just like
Ooh.
went off and like realized from people pleasing this person for so long, I finally reached like the limit. And
Yes.
you had said earlier something about like people pleasing, and the way that we do it sometimes is like outwardly and sometimes it's inwardly, and we just hold it in and we're like not releasing because we think that, we are restricted in some way. That's kind of what happened in the situations. I finally got to a point where I just unloaded on this lady. And yeah, at the time it felt pretty good. But in retrospect, when I thought about it over the weekend, and as you were talking a little bit ago, I was like, oh my gosh, that's it. That was my people pleasing at the time, right? Because all of these things about me didn't actually allow me to speak up in the moment, honestly, intelligently, grounded, clear, right? I just let it build up for like over, I think, 8 months of time, where I finally just lost my shit. But yet
Yep.
it was people pleasing. It was 100% people pleasing that finally just blew up in a way that I can reflect back on, because now it's a memory that I have of 20 years ago. So it's kind of rad that I can look back and see that and recognize that as people pleasing, and not just the kind of people pleasing people pleasing that we most often think of when we think of people pleasing. So, well, I'm going to turn it on you.
But what you just shared, like you just echoed what I learned over the weekend, where I was like,
Yeah.
what the shit? People pleasers get like a little fiery, because I'm the same way. So I just thought that was really interesting and something really important to talk about today. So thank you for that for that example. And you just sparked a memory in me that I hadn't thought about. Say 50% of the time. So I started in HR in 97. 50% of the time I was a department of one, and these are rough numbers. 50% I was on a team, up to 5 people, but mostly it was just me and another person. And as the director, I have not thought about this in years. As the director, when I had a subordinate, a colleague, whatever you want to call it, whatever term feels good for you, I always said, I want you to pick the parts. So we were both generalists, so to speak. I want you to pick the parts of HR that you love. And you tell me what those are, and you're going to take the lead on those, and I'll be your subordinate. And the parts you don't want, I'm going to take those on. That was full on people pleasing. Full on people pleasing. But you know what's really interesting? I think it was the narrative in my brain behind that there are parts of HR that are really sucky, and I wanted to almost protect the people that I had hired from the sucky parts of HR. And now that I'm saying this out loud, I realized I was doing everybody a disservice. I was super burned out. I got the shitty parts. I was the termination. I was the employee relations. I was the investigate, like all of the heavier stuff versus rewards and recognition. I mean, just the sort of onboarding, the sort of lighter sides of HR. I have never thought about that in terms of a people-pleasing way. And guess what? It burned me the F out. It really did. It really did. And I think about the last, I'm now my own boss. I'm a coach and a consultant. So my last 9-to-5 boss, I people pleased for the entire 5 years I worked for him. The entire 5 years. So for multiple years, he would say, hey, please get me this information to put into the budget so we can write your pay inequity. I was brought in very low comparatively to the men in comparable pay grades. And for the last 3 years, he said, I'm so sorry, we can't do it this year. I'm so sorry. And he kept saying, I'm so sorry after asking me. And here's where my people pleasing came in. I was like, that's okay. That's fine. We both know I'm underpaid compared to men. That's fine. Everybody else needs pay raises. The police department needs new vehicles. That's fine. I understand. And guess what happened? The Colorado Equal Work for Equal Pay Act happened in 2021. And I was like, not only do I know, because I lack the self-confidence that you have, I have to work really hard on my confidence and my self-esteem and my self-worth. So because Colorado law enacted something, that gave me the confidence to go to my boss and say, this is actually illegal. This isn't just me saying you need to write this inequity, right?
That's amazing.
Right.
I mean, like you got there and then you spoke to it like really quickly, right?
I did.
Good for you.
But check this out. His response was, how about we pick your last day? Okay. So here's my point about people pleasing.
I didn't see that twist coming.
Oh yeah, you didn't see that one coming? Because I sat in a people pleaser role in HR, putting everybody else's total compensation ahead of mine. Because I was a people pleaser, and because I did have that fire brewing, right? Yeah. That's okay. And meanwhile, I'm like, this is fucking bullshit, right? In the back of my mind, but I didn't articulate it. I didn't. I finally sheepishly stood behind Colorado law and said, this is why, right?
Yeah.
And boy, did our relationship change after that. I'll leave it at that. So people please, like, in hindsight, I'm like, oh my God. Like, because I was a people pleaser, That's a really interesting shift in perspective for me on that situation, on how I have shown up in my past, and how it's so important for me, as you said, to get into that alignment. And I'm much more in alignment. I think that one sentence changed my life. As anybody can imagine, right? Totally.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
show up very differently now.
Oh my gosh. I adore you so much. I mean, your willingness to kind of share that journey, because it is so terrifying. It's so terrifying to have to like put ourselves out there in that way to like communicate about our worth. Oh my gosh,
Right?
that's definitely an episode that we need to have, and if we don't have it on the books, we gotta get it on the books because talking about money, talking about our
Oh my
worth,
God.
especially if people in HR, where
Noted.
then we have to talk about compensation. Yeah, I mean, oh my gosh, but just in terms of people pleasing, thank you just for your willingness and your honesty to share that, because I think the growth that you just communicated, in terms of like you then being able to see that and knowing it all along, and then recognizing now the people pleasing that you were doing, it's like that just helped so many people, even if we have 0 viewers right now.
Which we're not sure what's happening. We could have hooked this up wrong again. Who knows? It says we're connected everywhere. Who knows? Who knows? I love that you are howling laughing right now.
I think after my last couple of days, I needed a good laugh. And I think with the
Hell yeah.
Facebook issues and the
Yes.
connectivity issues with the groups, this is definitely related because every typical episode we get typically 5 or so. So I'm like, something's wrong.
Something's up this morning and we're going to flow with it.
Yes,
We're just going to
we
flow.
are.
I mean, one thing I just want to bring up about that is that, after my boss said that to me, I was like, huh. And we were tight. We would sort of do things outside of work. I live in
Oh
a very small
man,
community. It's just what you do.
that's some bullshit
And
right there.
I was able to depart that employment. I mean, it happened a long time after that conversation. 2 people can be right at the same time. That's one of the greatest gifts that I was given when I was in therapy, is that 2 people can perceive a situation so differently. I get why he said that, and take ownership of my people pleasing ways. And
Yeah.
then my
Yeah.
ability to say, not anymore. Not anymore.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's okay to
Exactly.
change your mind, ladies and gentlemen, anybody, whether you're in HR or not, it doesn't matter. Whoever's listening to this podcast, it is okay to change your mind, and just know that there is absolutely an art to showing up in a way, right? That is impactful and that's useful. And we have no control over anybody else in this lifetime. So we don't need to make their opinion wrong per se in a situation like this. It's just recognizing, okay, we have very different opinions about that. That's okay. That's okay. Knowing this, what does the future look like? Right? So it's just, I don't know, really interesting stuff.
Yeah, it is. It is because I think a lot of times we don't recognize the power of reflection and the ability to take that power of reflection so that it can help us become more
Yes,
clear about where we can go in the future. Like all of that was,
absolutely.
yeah. So you just being able to kind of put that out there, I think not only probably is it therapeutic for you in a way, but it also like helps you then kind of recognize I would never go back. You'd never go back to that
No,
place once you've kind of been able to see that progression. And so there's so many gifts in that. Like there's just
so
so many
many.
gifts. It's one of the reasons I love this podcast and love these conversations so much because
I know.
they're just these little nuggets that I think
Yeah.
even, yeah, it's just beautiful because we're
Yeah.
all somewhere along the spectrum again. what we
Yeah.
were talking about. It
Yeah.
truly is. It's like we all do it, right? Like we
Yeah.
all do it. So we have to recognize that. And then where does it show up for you? Where are we like pleasing others in a way that leaves us not feeling super great about it? And so it's just, yeah, starting to kind of do those alignment checks.
Yeah.
So I really appreciate
Of
all of this
course.
conversation so much.
Oh my God. Killing me this morning. Okay. What about, I'm curious, like, if you have like something you can reflect back on, speaking of that skill of reflection, where your people pleasing negatively impacted other people. Have you ever put those two things together? Has there been a situation or a correlation between you showing up people pleasing and really had a negative impact on others or for others?
Yeah. So I I think, part of the what we've been talking about through this episode, and it's been so good, part of the journey of really becoming, the best version of ourselves is the releasing of what no longer serves us. And people pleasing for the reasons that don't serve us is one of those things. And so when we start to release that, doesn't always go over well
Right.
with others, right? Like with those that we love in our lives and those that we care about at work professionally. And so, I was really trying to think about this because it's really, for me, it's been that journey. It's not so much the journey that I spent so much of my life kind of blindly people pleasing without really knowing and having awareness of why I was doing it and now trying to kind of find that alignment. The bigger challenge is that I've had in my life is now finding that alignment, but then having it be perceived as others in ways that are hurtful or as though they feel not as cared about, like perceptions of others is
Yes.
such a tricky thing. And so when
Yes.
we are trying to kind of shift and evolve people pleasing ways that perhaps we had been habitually doing for so long, it's gonna upset, it's gonna hurt people, it's, professionally and personally. And so I think, that has been just the really tricky thing. And so I've had as I've started to kind of release that and say, hey, I truly care about you and I care about wanting to serve at the highest level, yet this does not serve me anymore.
Yeah.
And as honest and as heartfelt and as truthful, everything I
Oh,
try to
I
be
love that,
with it.
Jen.
Oh, it's heartbreaking. And I think it's really honest to talk about that because people need to understand that part of this journey, as wonderful as it is in becoming our best selves, is releasing this part that other people have relied on and other people really count on. And so
Yes.
professionally, I think I've gotten to a point where I've gotten really good at it. And here's where I end up having interesting conversations with clients and why I love working with women in HR as much as I do and working
Yeah.
on this podcast is
Totally.
because this is the area of my life I've fine-tuned for 20 years. And so
Yes.
I'm really good at it professionally, and it's a shit show personally.
Boom.
And it's something I'm working on, but it's those relationships personally that I think are the hardest. And they're the ones where we show up in people-pleasing ways that we're not fully conscious of a lot of times, right? And those are the ones that when we start becoming more authentically aligned with ourselves, it's gonna hurt. It's gonna be hard. And it's hard. I'm in a chapter, I'm in a journey in my life where it's a bit tough, and that's
Yeah.
okay. Like I'm
Yes.
just kind of holding on and I'm
Yes.
bracing through it. But people pleasing is a big, big thing, I think, for me in terms of alignment and recognizing that I still have a lot of work to do. So as much as I come on here, I'm like, I'm just confident. No, like I have a lot of work to do. It's just a different realm
Yeah.
for me. So what about you? Like, tell me, like, for you, what comes up for you with people pleasing and
I just want to say ditto.
Oh, it's
In
always good to
terms
know I'm not
of,
alone.
and it spans my very intimate relationships and my larger family. So I live in a ski resort community, and I have always been party, 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 go out, this little introvert who drinks a little bit too much. And suddenly I become a different version of myself, not a better version of myself, mind you, a different version of myself. And several years ago, I decided like I didn't want to be here anymore. I just didn't. And I really started the process of alignment that you've been talking about, checking in with myself. What do I actually want in this lifetime?
Mm-hmm.
And it was very much like looking at people pleasing, myself in the mirror with like the words people pleasing flashing right next to my face and saying, what do you actually want? And I have made very different decisions. I now live a very quiet life in a beautiful home in the middle of the mountains, and I've never been happier. So instead of just trying to, continue down this path of extreme socialization for an introvert, I just said, okay, I'm going to pivot. Some people in my life who really know me and see me have been like, good for you. And they're right there with me. I see them all the time. And then some other people have been like, you've changed.
Right.
And it's okay to let those people go. Truly. I think. I mean, I've done a lot of work to get there. And it's not like in some vindictive way. I still love them very much. It's just I have recognized what I need in this lifetime, if that makes sense. And it's not in this selfish way. It's just, I kind of want to be happy. And I saw very clearly
You kind of have that right.
And just that level of socialization was very misaligned with who I am as a human being. So it's just when it comes to my personal life and this shift I've also made in terms of standing tall for myself a little bit differently. I really believe I have disrespected myself for the majority of my life, including the way I showed up in HR, letting people scream at me. That's okay. I'm HR. I mean, scream in my face in front of my bosses.
I think 90% of the people who are listening are like,
absolutely. Right. And at the time I'm like, I'm HR, I can take this. And then in reflection, I'm like, whoa, what just happened there?
Yeah.
And it's been a pattern. So anyway, I think when it comes to work, I'll give a quick, brief example. I did not have coaching skills until 3-4 years ago. And I was very much a people pleaser. It was a pre-PIP conversation. There was an employee who, longtime employee, both women, and really could not see eye to eye. Kind of a new director, fully tenured employee. And they were like fire on fire. Okay. We had a contentious conversation. The employee leaves. The manager and I are sitting there, and she turns to me and says, I'm doing this wrong. I can see I'm doing this wrong. I didn't have the coaching skills to turn it into, hey, what would you like? How would you like to be showing up? Right? I didn't have that skill set at the time. Instead, I tapped into my old people pleasing skills and ways and said, you're doing great. This is just a really difficult situation. Full on people pleasing.
Yeah.
And it really did. I did her a disservice. I did the employee a disservice because I told her what she wanted to hear. And I just lacked the coaching skills. And what's really interesting is I don't shy away from hard conversations. I just don't.
You don't seem like the type.
I'm not. And yet, in certain situations, I am absolutely, I can fawn. I can fawn with the best of them. And in my research, for those of you who are not familiar with the term fawn yet, it's relatively new. So when you think about that, just that automatic response of fight, flight, or freeze, there's a new one, fawn. And there's an article about people pleasing and fawn being interchangeable, which I thought was really interesting in my research. Anyway,
With people pleasing.
With people pleasing, yes.
Okay, interesting.
Because if you think about it, people pleasing is fawning. You're just kind of like not saying anything and you're getting quiet and you're kind of not moving. It can be. It can be.
Yeah.
I guess
No,
not
it
100%
fits with
of the
mine
time.
too.
What's that?
I said it fits with my definition too.
Totally. Okay, so what do you think people pleasing is common in HR? I feel like you alluded to it a little bit earlier. Do you think that a lot of people in HR are people pleasers? Personally?
Yeah, I think we all are.
Check. Yes.
I think we all are. I think every human has people-pleasing tendencies.
Yeah.
And I think that in HR, you brought up such a good example of the confrontational situation, right? So whether or not it screams and faces or it's some variation, but it's legit very confrontational and uncomfortable. And we in HR, we subscribe, we sign ourselves up to get put into pretty confrontational and uncomfortable situations. And for many of the HR people that I've worked with in the past, that's really, really uncomfortable, right? We want out of it just like every other person in the world is going to want out of that situation as soon as possible. So what do I need to say? And this is where our ego trips us up, right? Like quite literally, this is where sometimes our fight, flight, freeze, fawn mechanisms are taking us out of awareness, right? So we just want to get out of it as quickly as possible. It's confrontational, it's uncomfortable.
Yep.
And so if we're not slowing down and if we're not really becoming aware of like what's really happening, and then what are we committing to? What are we actually saying to like shift things, and does that align? Like, and it's really hard. And so, we'll get into kind of the steps, but we're almost out of time anyway, so I'll put it out there. But for me, it's about like each time, like even if it's thinking back to those situations in your past where you really lost it, I would put that out for y'all as homework. Think of those times professionally where you kind of lost your shit a little bit, or something happened to cause you to really blow your top. And it could be years ago, but there is some nuggets in that about why what causes us to go there. Typically it's because of a misalignment, right? I don't think even typically, I would go so far as saying 100% of the time we are misaligned with our true selves, right? With our authenticity. So yeah, that would be such a cool homework assignment for listeners. And then to, let us know. I'd love to hear, and then we can share it,
So love to hear. Yeah.
Yeah, wouldn't it be cool? Because I think it's those moments where we really kind of lost it, because there's something about that that's like true about, how we're showing up for others that is not aligning with ourselves. So, but I don't remember where I was going with that. Okay. What about you? Where are you at?
I feel like I have two separate answers to this one, because I think people in HR, some people, maybe most people, are still fighting that stigma of HR's bad reputation. Kat Burt, the evil HR director. So I think in some ways, because we're trying to show up as the antidote to we're evil, we kind of swing far into our people-pleasing ways. So I think that that's totally normal. I think, first of all, people-pleasing is it's a normal thing. We just have to have an awareness around it, like we've been talking about. I think the other thing In HR, we feel responsible for the culture of an organization. Oftentimes, that is quite literally written into our job description. It is your job to influence the culture, and we define that culture. And I believe that in HR, we feel as though we have to model the behavior we expect to see in other people, whether it's people on our team, whether it's culturally throughout the organization. And I feel as though it kind of goes back to that example of, great job on your healthy boundaries. I'm so proud of you for taking a lunch today, other person, person in finance, person in IT, person in customer service, whoever that is. And I think that also plays a part into the people pleasing. You know, we want people in the organization, let's be honest, to work the hours they need to work to get things done. And oftentimes we're seeing it through that lens of, well, I'm showing up, I'm here, I'm working hard, where is everybody else? So it's almost like a little bit of compare and despair. And yet we want those people to have a life outside of work. But yet if we don't have a life outside of work, or we're working insane hours, it's that little bit of seething that's going, maybe it comes up as jealousy or envy. That to me, going back to Jen, what you said, is just indicative for any of our listeners to just say, hold up a second.
Yep.
Hold up a second. Something's off here. Something's off here. Yeah, totally. Totally.
Yeah. And for me, like I can answer that question in 5 seconds. I just have to figure out the strains that get there. It's about like, why am I not feeling good enough that I can't be taking care of myself?
Yeah.
Why do I feel unworthy to be able to have so I think that's the question that I try to be more deliberate about asking myself, because the bitterness, the seething, all of that comes down to, for me, I think, and so for so many of us, it comes down to like this deep sense of, I don't feel like I'm good enough to do
exactly.
You know?
And I'm going to go so far as to say
it comes out as bitterness and, all of that. And so, that's where, you just go a little bit further. I'm like, Katherine, pull that in. You just back a little bit more. You're almost there.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, it's literally, I was out in the garden all weekend, and just as I'm pulling up roots, because we're trying to get rid of this grass that the former owners kind of let take over our garden. And I'm literally thinking, like, you got to keep going deeper. And 100% of the time with my clients, no matter if they're trying to overcome that overthinking, overworking, overdrinking, overeating, over people, whatever it is, 100, I have yet to have a client in 25 years, whether I was in employee relations, whatever, 25 years, it always comes down to self-doubt. And our narrative that has led to that self-doubt and keeps us stuck in lack of self-worth, that's different for every human. So that's why there's no one size fits all. How somebody's going to unlearn that and unwrap that and start down a new path is very individualistic. So,
and beautiful, really cool, and exciting and overwhelming,
awesome,
and scary, and like all these things, for anybody out there, it's all of those things, but it's very worth it. Very, very worth it.
What advice do you have? Like, knowing that it's worth it, knowing that our listeners are probably struggling with people pleasing, do you have any advice or insights?
Yeah, I was just having coffee with a friend yesterday, and for me, what I've really, really realized, and what's really taken off for me, is finding community. Right. And I think we're in a day and age where that looks so different. I mean, look at you and I on these Zoom calls. We've not yet met in person.
Nope. Coming up though.
And it is so about community for me.
Yes.
I really, really realize that, because, we can't do it alone. No. None of this we can do alone, and especially in HR, but it's like in the whole thing of life. And the more that we can find, whether it's mentors and coaches and counselors, just friends, community groups, I'll find, like there's just so many different ways to find others who can help support us and see us. Because you said something earlier that I got chills over my body. Mm-hmm. Being seen by others who really want to see the very best in you, to want to see you thrive, that is a rare thing. And I
Yeah.
think when we find those people, we need
Yes.
to hold on to them,
Oh,
and we
yeah.
need to love on them just as
Yeah.
hard. And so
Yeah.
that's what I mean about being flexible and open about what that looks like in your own life. I think for everybody, it could look different. It could be remote. It could be in person. I'm now, like over the past several months, I'm now part of AA. I never thought I'd be part of like
That's
an
amazing.
in-person, non-drinking group. And I'm like, oh, it's all religious and this, not that was all perception. But the reality is it's community of people who see me. Right. And so like that's it. And so people pleasing is really about like the self-awareness first and foremost by a
Mhm.
mile. And then secondly, to find those who see you in a way that they see the growth that you're trying to make as beautiful. And
Mm.
that can be a tough thing, especially in a chapter of change. Well,
Yeah.
what about you? I know we got to wrap up. We're over an
Yeah.
hour.
Let's go ahead and just wrap up. I actually have seven bits of advice, but I'm teaching them in HR Empower Hour tomorrow.
Oh,
So
good. Everybody, please make sure to join HR and Power Hour.
yeah, there are techniques. There are ways that you can show up differently, but you can also ask for help from others to help you
Yeah.
show up differently as well. But just the little,
Is
I
there a
think the
quick way
little,
to say the 7? I mean, just a sneak peek?
I mean, I'll give one, and we've talked
Okay.
about it. Understanding, literally understanding between the stimulus, between what happens in our lives
Mhm.
and how we respond or react, there is a space.
Yes.
So knowing that
Yes.
that is what
Yes, yes,
makes
yes.
us a different animal than the human beings, right? We
Mhm.
have this part of our brain that allows us to say, hold on a second. And you can actually ask yourself, Jen, you've been saying this all along. Do I have the time and do I have the energy for this to be helpful for the organization and for me?
Yeah.
Knowing you have like thinking, well, I just react. That's who I am. That's actually not true. There is a space. So, first, having that awareness and then choosing what you do with that space and literally asking yourself what you were saying, that gut check with yourself. Do I have the time? Do I have the bandwidth, the energy for this, for the organization and for me?
Yeah.
Which I think is a big one in and of itself.
It is
Yeah,
I mean, it's so massive. That
it's
pause, I
massive.
call it the pause. And that's
Pause.
it.
The
That's the
pause.
pause that gives you an
Yeah.
opportunity to do that
Yes.
gut check, that alignment. Does this feel right? It doesn't need to feel good. It doesn't need to always feel happy. We as humans are completely delusional if we think we need to be happy all the time. But does it feel right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
That's some fire right there to end on, Jen. Does it
Another
feel right?
great conversation, Katherine.
Amazing. Well, Jen, thank you. And to all of our listeners, please don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review. We love doing this podcast. We love connecting with everyone. Jen and I are both getting feedback offline, online, about how powerful this podcast is for everyone. So thank you for all of you who've reached out to us. If you haven't reached out to us,
Thank you.
we want to know. We want the good, the bad, and the ugly. So give it to us. If you've got some feedback for us, some constructive, maybe not, we'll take anything. We love the accolades and we love to know how we can make this better for you as well. So above all, just remember that every single day is a great day to thrive and shine in HR.
Bye, everybody. Have a great week.
Ciao.